Well, the time has come. My early Oscar predictions in all 8 of the top categories. What do I think is going to be nominated at the upcoming 97th Academy Awards for Best Adapted Screenplay? Hi, it's Brian. Welcome to the Awards Contender. I'm very excited to talk to you today about all the top contenders for Best Adapted Screenplay. There are at least 2 or 3 contenders I would say are pretty much for sure getting in. And then slots 4 and 5 are kind of wide open right now. Let's start with the ones I'm pretty sure are going to be nominated next year. Conclave is a certainty. I think this one might win. It's still very early. I'm not quite sure how much the Academy is going to go for Conclave. I could see them only giving it like 4 or 5 nominations, or going all in and giving it 8 or more, like giving it multiple acting nominations, tons of nominations in tech categories. If that happens, if Conclave gets in pretty much everywhere it can, I think it's probably going to be the frontrunner to win Best Adapted Screenplay. It's a very dialogue-driven movie, and so I think if it can win somewhere, Adapted Screenplay makes sense, especially if it gets into like Picture, Director, Best Actor for Ralph Fiennes, at least one other acting category. There's really only one movie I could see right now beating it, and that's like a big if, because I do believe most of the season it will be nominated at award shows and things in original screenplay, and that's Emilia Perez. For weeks, I thought this was an original screenplay, but then I found out later it is based loosely on a novel, and it does have some elements where you can't fully call it an original script. And as we know with the Academy, they are very strict when it comes to adapted screenplay. Barbie last time showed up pretty much everywhere in original, but then at the Oscars, as I expected, it did show up in adapted. And so Emilia Perez is going to go adapted at the Academy Awards, not original. And so I think Conclave and Emilia Perez might be the 2 scripts in adapted battling it out. I think because Emilia Perez is so beloved and it's going to do well this upcoming award season, I could see it winning some things in at least one of the acting categories. I can see it getting into Picture, maybe even Director. But is that a movie you necessarily reward the screenplay? I'm not so sure about that. I also think the musical numbers in the film will hurt it in the screenplay category. So if I had to bet money right now, I would say Conclave has a better chance at winning Best Adapted Screenplay, but Emilia Perez, I'm pretty sure, is at least getting in. And then the third film I feel pretty comfortable predicting right now is Sing Sing, even though I still haven't seen it yet. It never came to my town. Everybody I've talked to who've watched it love this movie and say it's getting into Picture, Best Actor for Coleman Domingo, and Adapted Screenplay for sure. Like at least those 3 categories, if not a few more. And so I guess I will take them at their word. I do feel like if Sing Sing just crashes and burns and really underwhelms this upcoming award season, I feel like it still gets into Best Actor and Best Adapted Screenplay. I cannot imagine, with all of the raves I have heard going back months and months, that it can't get into Adapted Screenplay, even if it were to miss Picture, which I don't think it will. I think Adapted Screenplay, it's probably safe. It's not an overly competitive category this year. There are many other movies I'm going to talk about in this video. But I cannot imagine Sing Sing missing in this category. I think it's going to get in, and I'm hoping one of these days I get to see it. The Room Next Door is a big question mark for me. I feel like that could get into Adapted Screenplay. Tilda Swinton, if not at the Oscars, is going to show up somewhere this award season for Best Actress. And the Academy adores Pedro Almodovar. They gave him a screenplay win back in early 2003 for Talk to Her. So he's won in screenwriting at the Oscars before, and The Room Next Door is a very good film. He could maybe make it in. But then I looked on IMDb at what other Oscar nominations Almodovar has been nominated for, and it's only Best Director for the same film. Talk to Her. I was kind of shocked to learn there's no other movie in his long career that he's ever been nominated for at the Academy Awards. Like nothing else in director or screenplay. So it's been over 20 years. And I feel like he's made better films in that time than The Room Next Door. Like he wasn't nominated in screenwriting for Parallel Mothers or Voltaire or Pain and Glory. I don't think he's going to be nominated for The Room Next Door. If this movie can get one Oscar nomination, I do think it would be Tilda Swinton in actress. I'm Still Here was one of my great discoveries at the Toronto Film Festival, a movie I knew almost nothing about, and it became one of my 10 favorites I watched there during the week. I kept thinking in the days after I saw it, like, can this movie get into the Oscars in any other category but international feature? This is Brazil's official submission for their country, and I do think I'm Still Here is getting an Oscar nomination in Best International Feature. Can it get into Adapted Screenplay? Can it get into Best Actress for Fernanda Torres? I would love to see it, and I think in Adapted Screenplay, it is going to be hovering around like 6th, 7th, 8th place. Can it get into the top 5? I'm not seeing it right now, unless there is a swell of passion for this film going into December and January. And if it can get into a second category, I do think actress is just so stacked. Fernanda Torres getting in there at the Oscars would be kind of a miracle, but Best Adapted Screenplay has enough wiggle room, I would say. It could surprise there. I'm not predicting it right now, but I do think it might be close. Now, 3 more awards buzzy movies I saw in Toronto that will be competing for a slot in Adapted Screenplay are The Piano Lesson and Queer and Night Bitch. All 3 of those movies are based on existing works and could get into Adapted Screenplay, if not at the Oscars, somewhere during the season. Now, if you watched any of those reviews, you would know these were 3 of my least favorite films I saw at TIFF. So outside of maybe an acting nomination for some of those, I don't see any of those 3 movies getting into Adapted Screenplay. The Piano Lesson is based on the work of August Wilson, and just that alone will keep it in the conversation, I think. I just believe that The Piano Lesson is too underwhelming of a movie to get into this category, and I also think the genre elements of the narrative will hurt it too. And then Queer, the only chance I think that movie has at getting into the 97th Academy Awards is in Best Actor. That is it. I think Daniel Craig, in a field right now, as I talked about with Oscar expert and Brother Bro in that video a few days ago, Best Actor isn't overly crowded. There is room in slots 4 and 5 for someone who's maybe in a divisive movie to break in on Oscar nominations morning. Daniel Craig is a beloved actor, and he might be able to do it, but I do not see Queer getting into like Best Picture or Best Adapted Screenplay. That would very much surprise me. And then Night Bitch, again, I think if it showed up anywhere, it would be in Best Actress for Amy Adams. I do think the big problem with that movie, in a way, is the screenplay is not going far enough in its surrealism, and I do think that hinders the second half of the movie because the reviews have mostly been like mixed to positive, but not like too many raves. Not too many people are just like going nuts for Night Bitch as a movie. I also don't think that will get into Adapted Screenplay. Now, one movie I definitely have my eye on right now to get into Best Adapted Screenplay is Nickel Boys. This played at the Telluride Film Festival, it played at New York, and I have heard so many enthusiastic, like rapturous reviews for this movie. I can't wait to see it. I haven't personally watched it yet, but I'm getting the sense that even if it kind of underperforms at the Oscars, it probably gets into Adapted Screenplay because there is such passion for it as a film, and because it's based on this very popular acclaimed novel by Colson Whitehead, I don't think Nickel Boys is going to be just completely ignored at the Oscars. It sounds like too strong of a film, so I'm not 100% on that one yet, but I'm definitely leaning toward Nickel Boys getting into Adapted Screenplay. And then a couple films coming out at the end of December that obviously we haven't seen yet. One is A Complete Unknown. Is A Complete Unknown going to get into the Oscars a lot beyond, say, Best Actor for Timothée Chalamet? It might. If everybody really loves this film, and it gets great reviews, and it has big box office going into January, I could see this movie getting into Best Picture and Best Actor, of course, and Best Adapted Screenplay. I have it right now in 6th place. Like, I'm very close to predicting A Complete Unknown in Adapted Screenplay. What holds me back a little is that it is a very late release, and that can be kind of tricky when you're talking about tons and tons of Oscar nominations. It seems to hurt a film these days if you bring it out too late in the year. And then the other thing is that it's going to have a lot of singing in it, a lot of songs. And I'm like, is that going to get into Adapted if there's a lot of singing? So I'm like, I'm right on the cusp because I do think it's going to be popular. But right now I have that in 6th place. And then I have to mention Nosferatu. I know it would be very unlikely for a vampire movie to get into screenplay, but I have this feeling that's going to be an excellent movie. It's going to be fantastic. Anything less than a 9 out of 10 for Nosferatu is going to be disappointing. And so I feel like Nosferatu is going to get into a few tech categories, maybe as many as 3 or 4. And if it is just a monumental horror film, like people just go nuts for Nosferatu, I could see it slipping into Adapted Screenplay in a total shocker. And then we've got some sequels. We've got a few sequels that could, depending on how this all shakes out, get into Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars. Inside Out 2, I have to mention, because the last animated movie to get into screenplay was Inside Out 1 from 2015. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Inside Out 2 gets into Best Animated Feature, and that's it. You have Joker, Folie à Deux. I think the poor reviews of this movie have kind of killed its chances in many top categories at the Oscars. I think it still gets in somewhere, like in tech categories. But when it comes to like Best Picture, the acting categories, Best Adapted Screenplay, it's not looking very good right now. You have Gladiator 2, which is another one we haven't seen yet, but if it's like really, really popular, everybody goes nuts for Gladiator 2, everybody loves it. It gets into Best Picture at the Oscars. It gets into maybe Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor. I could see Gladiator 2 getting into Best Adapted Screenplay, like pushing out what I have right now in 5th place. Like, it's possible. I just, based on the trailer and based on the kind of movie it is, I don't really see it as an Adapted Screenplay contender. But again, if everybody loves it, it might happen. We shall see. The sequel we got this year that I do think is probably going to be nominated in Best Adapted Screenplay is Dune Part 2. I'm really hopeful right now. Just because it came out way back in March, you could argue, well, it might only get into a few tech categories, maybe picture and nothing else. Even if it doesn't get into director and the acting categories, I feel like Dune Part 2 probably makes it into Adapted Screenplay. Because I feel like most people understand how hard of a novel that is to adapt, and how they did it so well for 2 different movies based on the original novel. Like, they did such a masterful job, and the first film got nominated in Adapted Screenplay. Like, I'm not super confident in that prediction. It's very possible, like, Dune Part 2 could be tossed aside for Gladiator 2 or A Complete Unknown. But right now, I'm feeling semi-good. I feel like Dune Part 2 is a good enough movie. It was a huge blockbuster success. Almost everybody loves it. as long as it's still in the game. Like everybody's still talking about it come December, January, it doesn't fade away because it came out so early in the year. I think Dune Part 2 can make it in. Now, before I get to my early predictions, there's one more title I wanted to throw out. Like a for your consideration, I think this movie deserves to be nominated at the Oscars for Best Adapted Screenplay, and that's The Wild Robots. I think this is one of the best films of the year. It's so beautifully done. It's such an achievement on every level in the animation and the voice work and that screenplay. Like, that is a very tight script. There is no wasted moment, no wasted scene in that movie. It just zips along. There is no fat on that screenplay. Like, they really got it at just the right place it needed to be to make this such a rich experience for audiences all over the world with so much emotion and heart and inspiration. Like, everything about The Wild Robot, I think, is a masterclass in storytelling, and I do think this is an animated movie that deserves to be nominated at the Oscars for Best Adapted Screenplay. And now, having said all of that, what are my early predictions for the upcoming 97th Academy Awards in Best Adapted Screenplay? Right now, my predictions in alphabetical order are Conclave, Dune Part 2, Amelia Perez, Nickel Boys, and Sing Sing. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and let me know in the comments below, what do you predict will be nominated at the upcoming Oscars in Best Adapted Screenplay, and I'll see you next time at the awards contender.